Good afternoon. This is Senator Pat Roberts, and thank you for taking time to join me on our live town hall meeting via telephone, what we like to call Chat with Pat. Now, I want to hear from as many of you as I can about the issues you care about. You can also add me on Facebook and Twitter to see what we are fighting for every day in your behalf. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, here's how it works. Press 0 to ask a question right now or any time during the call. Easy deal. Press 0 to ask me a question. Now, this call is going to last for the next hour, and I'm going to try to get to as many questions as possible. This is also a live call and official in nature, so if we can keep all the talk about campaigns or politics on the back burner, why, that's what we need to do. Again, for those of you just joining the call, this is Senator Pat Roberts. I am hosting a free live town hall meeting via telephone, what we call Chat with Pat. Press 0 at any time during this call if you would like to ask me a question. First off, let me allow you to update you on our work in your behalf. As the senior Marine in the Congress, I have long fought to ensure our military heroes receive the care and benefits they deserve after active duty. Issues about backlog claims, coupled with the breaking news about the problems in the Arizona Veterans Department and that hospital, we are now hearing about other instances around the country. All this is tragic and outrageous. We must do better for our veterans. While Congress holds hearings and investigates these specific cases, I have joined my colleagues in proposing legislation that I believe should improve the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs Management Accountability Act, would give complete authority to the VA Secretary to fire or to demote those VA leaders based on performance. We need the best employees managing the Veterans Affairs departments. Likewise, I support an independent investigation of the VA. We have to find out what went wrong and why. We have to find out who was responsible for the decisions that led to unresponsive care or unscrupulous practices, and we must hold them accountable. And yes, that should include the possibility of criminal charges. Just today, I signed a letter written by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina that calls for a special investigation of the VA, especially the wait list cover-up and whether VA employees may have received performance bonuses, which we now know they did not deserve. Most important, we must fix the problems within the VA so that the veterans receive the care that they deserve and that this country owes them. Again, for those of you just joining the call, this is Senator Pat Roberts. I am hosting a free live town hall meeting via telephone, what we call Chat with Pat. Press 0 at any time during this call if you would like to ask me a question. I have also joined fellow Senate Republicans in calling for a special select committee to investigate the Obama administration's handling of the terrorist attacks in Benghazi. Americans deserve the truth. The families of the 4 Americans who were murdered deserve the truth. And yet the administration continues to deny and evade. That's why the Senate must appoint, it seems to me, a select committee to investigate the administration's handling of the terrorist attacks in Benghazi without further delay. I called on Majority Leader Reid to follow Speaker Boehner's leadership. If they have nothing to hide, Harry Reid should not be afraid of this investigation. This case is not closed. I believe all Americans deserve to know what happened that tragic night. Certainly, the families of the 4 murdered Americans deserve answers. Again, Senator Pat Roberts, I'm holding a live town hall meeting. Please press 0 to ask a question. We'll get to you. Until recently, the U.S. has done everything imaginable to strengthen ties with Russia. It was called a Russia reset. And to help stabilize the country after President Reagan won the Cold War. But Russia, unfortunately, is no longer an ally. Vladimir Putin is attempting to redraw the lines of Europe with the use of the Russian military, as we are witnessing in the Ukraine. I have serious concerns regarding the stability of the entire region, especially our non-NATO allies such as Georgia and Moldova, and the countries that belong to NATO, more especially Poland. I know many of you share my concerns. I have heard from hundreds of Kansans who fear what President Putin will do next, and even of history repeating itself. We're talking about the 1930s and Adolf Hitler. This Russian reset is not working. We need a reset on the reset. I think it's time for a full national security reset, one where the United States returns to leading by leading and truly assessing what the critical threats are to our national security. The first step is to end all defense contracts with Russia. Just this week, I joined Senator Cornyn, Senator Coates, on a bill which would immediately end all current and future contracts with Russia's state-owned defense contractors. Additionally, I was proud to help write and introduce legislation with my Republican colleagues which draws a red line where the President has failed to do so. This bill requires the Department of Defense to increase NATO exercises, I emphasize exercisers, on the continent, especially in Poland and the Baltics, and it places tough sanctions on Russia's chief economic sector, oil and gas, as well as Russia's chief defense manufacturer. Folks, without stability in Europe, the security of the United States becomes increasingly vulnerable. I hope we see an end to Putin's aggressive behavior. I hope that diplomacy works. But this will be an ongoing challenge for us and our allies. Again, this is Senator Pat Roberts, and I'm conducting a live town hall meeting. Please press 0 to ask a question. Finally, we turn to the IRS. As you know, the IRS has caused its share of problems. In fact, it has been 1 year since we discovered the agency unlawfully targeted conservative groups for extra scrutiny. We saw more proof of this outrageous behavior with the release of the internal IRS emails, showing clearly that the IRS Washington headquarters was directing the targeting. It's becoming increasingly clear that the agency responded to pressure from congressional opponents of the right of our conservative groups to participate in our electoral process and exercise their First Amendment rights. And this led the IRS to attack these groups through the regulatory process. That's shameful, and I will not stand down until people are held accountable. Now, we're still investigating this wrongdoing in the Senate Finance Committee, and I am fighting to clean up the IRS and hold people accountable. Despite this scandal, the IRS went on to propose regulations, get this, went on to propose regulations that would have put the abuse of the First Amendment rights into regular practice. I led the Senate fight against these regulations, and the crazy idea that the IRS could regulate these or propose these regulations in the midst of an investigation. Now, the IRS commissioner recently announced, however, they would have to rewrite the rules. I think we won one. So far, we have won that battle. Now, folks, you know and I know what went on there. We know the IRS was directed to give these conservative groups scrutiny by members of Congress. We have copies of letters they wrote. But we don't even need letters. We see this kind of intimidation on the Senate floor every day. The majority leader, Harry Reid, is down on the Senate floor every day complaining about Charles and David Koch, two Kansans who oppose Harry Reid and the president's liberal agenda every day on the floor of the U.S. Senate. The majority leader attacks two private citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights. I think the majority has gone so far as to propose an amendment to the First Amendment to silence this opposition. Well, yesterday I went to the floor and I told the majority that is not how the Constitution works. The First Amendment is not meant to protect senators. It protects the people, and it is just fine as it is. We don't need to amend it. Harry Reid is not James Madison. I called on the leader to stop engaging in the character assassination of the Kochs and to abandon attempts to amend the First Amendment to silence dissent. Again, this is Senator Pat Roberts. I'm conducting a live town hall meeting. Please press 0 to ask a question. First question is from Frank in Independence.
Hello, this is Frank.
Yes, sir.
This is Frank in Independence. My question is Topeka, PA being investigated? I had a called us last week asking about my care at Independence, which has been a little questionable. Is Wichita involved in an investigation?
Well, Frank, I'm sorry you're having these problems. We have a great team on my staff who every day try to help Kansans navigate the federal government, and we help folks straighten out problems with the VA or the IRS or the USDA or whatever agency we're talking about. No matter the federal agency, hopefully we can help cut the red tape, make sure you are treated fairly. In your particular case, would you please call my Topeka office, and that number is 785-295-2745. And I'd like to see what we can do to help. The number again in Topeka, 785-295-2745. To date, Frank, I am not aware of any serious problems in either Wichita or Topeka. Last fall, I wrote a letter to the Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary Shinseki requesting detailed information about the doctor shortage at the Calmary O'Neill facility in Topeka and additional oversight from the VA. In February, due to the medical staffing shortages, Calmary O'Neill announced the emergency room will now be in urgent care with reduced hours, and all veterans needing emergency care will be diverted to surrounding hospitals. And I recently communicated with the VA and learned the VA is having weekly meetings with that facility and the VA in Kansas to review the emergency room issues. That's a problem. We're working on it. But any other serious things like what happened in Arizona, we have no information on that as of now. The VA is also actively recruiting, by the way, about 4 doctors to fill these vacancies. Just a reminder, Senator Pat Roberts, this is a live town hall meeting. Thank you for taking out of your afternoon to join me. Just press 0 a question. Limit on time. We're going to get to as many questions as possible. Press 0. And we have Martin in Columbus.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
It's just like these people work in the restaurants and these people on Social Security. There's a lot of them that draw nothing for money. It's not right. There's people around here that's just getting $200 and some a month for Social Security, and their husband gets $400 and some a month. It's nothing. And they was tremendous workers when they were young. They were bus drivers, janitors at school, and stuff like this here, and they don't draw no Social Security at all. You hear what I said?
Yes, sir. Well,
that's right.
Let me be clear. Any Social Security reform proposal considered by the Congress must not impact current or near-term retirees, but you're saying that they're not receiving Social Security now. I don't see how that's possible, and I'd like to really get to the bottom of that. Would you please do me a favor and call my office in Topeka at 785-295-2745. Martin, I want to know more about this. And I don't think we can do it over the phone today where we're having a teletown hall meeting. Please call Topeka, 785-295-2745. I hope you got that. On the minimum wage, I think we would be better off if, in fact, that were a state issue. But we're not going to go into that now. I want you to call my Topeka office and get this cleared up. Thank you so much. We have George from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
George. Yeah, George.
Well, I'm concerned about the government printing more money and the inflation possibilities and what the government is trying to do to balance the budget. I know that's not a Senate thing, but have you had any insides to that?
Well, George, I share your concerns about inflation. We see it in food and gas prices and everything else. But the thing that is really the problem, as far as I'm concerned, or at least part of the problem, results from the Federal Reserve's unprecedented intervention into the economy. We're talking about $75 billion at least. But cost rises also result from overall federal actions, and that's seeing that debt go up to $18 trillion. That would have been unbelievable 10 years ago. I think the best response is to grow the economy, but I've always been for a balanced budget amendment. I don't know if there's any other way that we can restore fiscal integrity to this Congress. We have a serious and growing deficit and debt problem in Washington, and we can't get a handle on the runaway spending with borrowed money, which is exactly what's happening with the Federal Reserve. So I have been trying as hard as I can with my votes, and there are others that also share my belief that Washington has to rein in the federal spending and reduce the deficit. Now, having said that, I want to tell you one thing I am concerned about. There's an awful lot of talk about entitlement programs and what that means, but the President has recommended tremendous cuts to our military down to pre-World War II levels. You got to be careful. You can't do this with a Lizzie Borden axe and take a look at our national security and take a whack that big. We have to do it in a more across-the-board fashion and do it very carefully. But to answer you, yes, we have to reduce spending. We have to reduce the debt. I would like to see the Federal Reserve get out of this business. And one thing I'd like to see is the government overregulation that we are experiencing and the federal intrusiveness into all of our lives. That's a cost that everybody has to pay in regards to the federal government or anybody else out of their pocketbook. Thank you very much for that question. Just a reminder, Senator Pat Roberts, live teletown hall meeting. Thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to join me. Please press 0 to ask a question. We'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. Press 0. We have Marie in Columbus. Yes, Marie.
Yes. One of my heroes is my grandson, Marine. And I want to know when they're going to get the respect that they deserve on medical.
Well, Marie, I don't know if your son's having a special problem or if he's on active duty or if he's a reserve. If there's a problem with his case, again, I want you to call my Topeka office. I can give you that number. But thank you for his service. My dad was a Marine, I'm a Marine, and so is your son. And we owe a gratitude toward those who have worn the uniform regardless of what service. And as our warriors come home, we have to ensure that our nation supports them as they transition back to civilian life. That's why we talked a great deal earlier about supporting improving all veterans' health care services and preserving an important veteran program currently in place. What's going on and what we have found out in the VA is outrageous. And I'm very hopeful that we can get to the bottom of it as quickly as we can. But Marie, if your son has a particular problem, please take this number down, 785-295-2745. We have a caseworker waiting right now to take your call about your son if you feel we can be of help. 785-295-2745. Thank you so much. We have Ed from Independence. Ed, are you there?
Yeah, this is Ed Doherty in Independence.
Yes, sir.
My question is with the Russia situation that we've got. I'm old enough to remember World War II when Russia was called the Red Army. And I used to sit and listen to that radio, and them Red Army was moving a bunch of miles every day. What would you do that we aren't doing that can even stop this, what he's got in mind?
Well, Ed, I think, number one, there's legislation with several of my colleagues, most of whom have served on the Armed Services Committee or the Intelligence Committee or the Foreign Relations Committee. We recognize the threat. Rest assured, any W-2 veteran understands what the Red Army is capable of. At any rate, this legislation provides a response to the crisis in the Ukraine, where the president, I just don't think he has failed to stand up to Putin. I don't think our enemies fear us. and I don't think our allies really trust us. This legislation does three things. It increases the U.S. exercises, I'm talking about NATO now, and troop presence within the NATO forces in the NATO countries. I do not think the Russians are going to make any move with their military through American forces. I don't think they'll do that. It implements effective and hard-hitting sanctions on Russia, which target Russia's economic center. And it provides military aid and assistance to the Ukraine. Now, the President has announced additional sanctions on Russian citizens, but the administration has really failed to target Russia's economy through either the oil or banking sector. I think that ought to be on the table as well. We are ready to hold responsible the Russians for their aggressive action in eastern Ukraine. Allowing Crimea to simply go into Putin's hands was a terrible mistake, and in subsequent regions in Ukraine, hold independence referendums. I would like to see this president respond with a real red line and stick to it. So I share your concern. I hope it doesn't come to the fact that in trying to redraw the boundaries of Europe that the Red Army is unleashed. I will tell you this, if it does, they will pay a heavy price. We may have to drag the president along with us, but they'll pay a heavy price. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. We have Dennis from Overbrook. Yeah, Dennis.
Yes, this is Dennis from Overbrook. I find it hard to understand how you can consider yourself a citizen of the state of Kansas if you no longer live here. And I'm sure, at least in my case, it's going to affect how I consider the upcoming election.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for the question, Dennis. I'm glad you asked me that question. Let me just take a moment to clear up the facts. Now, listen up. Last week, a state election board unanimously dismissed objections to my candidacy on the grounds that the objections had no legal basis. And I more than meet the legal and constitutional requirements for residency in the state of Kansas, and I always have. My home's in Dodge City. I own a home in Dodge and declared my residency there years ago, 30 years ago, because of the support and the kindness the people of Dodge have always shown to me. And I used to write articles for the High Plains Journal out there. I vote in Dodge, I pay property taxes in Dodge, I pay income taxes in Kansas, I represent the entire state. We're going to finish up our 105 county listing tour here pretty quick. It is true that in owning a building in Dodge, that it is now rented out to a captain in the Army. That's been open several times before, and we do rent. A lot of congressmen, by the way, do rent. Now, despite this state schedule, I rarely miss a vote in the Senate. And I want to tell you something else about myself. When you say that I'm not a native Kansan or I'm not a Kansan, or somebody else says, I'm a fourth-generation Kansan. My great-grandfather founded the Oskaloosa Independent, the second oldest state at that time. He fought to make the state a free state. He was a Marine. I'm a Marine. I picked up the fight. I have never stopped fighting for Kansan. Our crazy schedule in the Senate is one of the reasons I am grateful for venues like this where I can take your questions and speak directly to you about the issues of the day. I am a Kansan, and you might consider that when you vote. Ed of Topeka. Ed of Topeka.
Yes, Senator. I would like to know how you intend to vote in regards to Social Security and Medicare.
Well, Ed, I'm not sure which pieces of legislation you're talking about. If you're just talking overall legislation concerning Social Security, let me be clear. Any Social Security reform proposal designed to keep it fiscally sound that would be considered by Congress must not impact current or near-term retirees. So we must work to ensure the long-term solvency of this program. That's obvious. Ensuring the long-term viability for our kids and their kids are not going to come without real difficult choices. But during my service in the Congress, I have fought hard to protect and strengthen both Social Security and Medicare, and for that matter, Medicaid, for generations to come. And my record shows that I have voted to decrease wasteful government spending and ensure that Social Security funds will not be used to offset the cost of other programs. Just let me say that Social Security is an important component of the American workers' retirement planning. It serves as a vital safety net for individuals with disabilities and those surviving families of workers who have passed away. So I think that pretty well covers it. Thanks for the question. Just a reminder, Senator Pat Roberts, live teletown hall meeting. Thank you for taking the time of your day to join me. Press 0 to ask a question. We're trying to get to as many as possible. And if you're interested in receiving updates from me on a regular basis, you can press 7 to subscribe to my e-newsletters. Why don't you just do that right now, and a member of my staff will take down your email address. Press 0 to ask a question. We have Helen of Topeka. Helen, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I am. I wanted to know how President Obama can bypass Congress on some of the things that he said in his speech.
Well, Helen, we got a problem with the president. He has just stated that he can't work with Congress. He can't work with the elected representatives of the people. And he has decided that he's just going to do it by executive order or executive waiver. Recently, the president has taken a very lenient approach, and that's probably the understatement, to executive orders. There's a bill. It's in the Senate. It's called the Enforce Act, which stands for the executive needs to faithfully observe and respect congressional enactments. That's a lot of fancy words to say, look, the Constitution says that spending decisions, spending responsibility is in the House of Representatives. That's where it starts, because that's the people's house. Every 2 years, they have an election. Then it's considered by the Senate. And then the president's job is to administer the legislation or the spending priorities that we pass in the Congress. Administer. It doesn't say change. It doesn't say waiver. It doesn't say executive order and bypass the Congress. So this bill would allow the House or Senate, by adopting a resolution, to authorize civil action to seek relief on unconstitutional overreach, and I think there's been a bunch. I am defending the constitutionally divided powers through legislative initiatives, lawsuits, the bully pulpit, the appropriation means, if we take money away from people, and whatever means at my disposal. I'm not going to let up. The fact the president continues to circumvent the Congress shows me his contempt for the Constitution. And it frustrates me this administration must be continually reined in with its government overreach. Thank you so much for that question. Horace of Topeka. Horace, are you there?
Yes, I am, Senator. I don't know if you remember me, but I was president of Arco Pipeline during the time that Bob Dole was head of finance in the Senate and so forth. I remember you very well.
Let me remind you that Bob Dole is out there conducting another listening tour of Kansas.
I understand that.
I think it's remarkable that at his age he can do it. He's getting good crowds. He's in much better health. I am so proud of him. At any rate, thank you for the call, Horace, and bless your heart.
Well, are you leaving me? I did have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When I retired from Arco Pipeline as president of that company in Independence, Kansas, I became Secretary of Transportation for the state of Kansas under Mike Hayden. I was introduced to you by Hazel Allison, whom I'm sure you remember.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question has to do with some things that are alarming to me, and I'm in good enough health so that I really intend to be active in upcoming elections. I've always been a registered Republican, and I served back when Senator Brownback, who's now governor, was liaison to the agricultural community here, and I'm trying to decide how active I should be in supporting the current slate of Congress people from the state of Kansas versus doing all I can to oppose the red meat politics that are going on here now. My real question to you is, I remember you a man of great wit and perspicacity and all of that is, and I've heard some of the red meat conversation between you and other folks who talk about your residency here and ask about things. And of course, I know you're doing what you must do as a Republican to castigate the president instead of talking about what useful kind of combination of governmental powers can be exercised by the Congress and the president to make the next 2 years useful. I really am concerned with whether or not or in what fashion you or Senator Pat Roberts are interested in trying to have a more constructive relationship with this president as opposed to just being the party of opposition of the far-right Republican Tea Party and its adherents in the mainstream Republican Party. I know that's a convoluted way of asking you a question, but I would like to think of you as being a force for constructive dialogue, and the signals are very mixed about that, Senator.
Well, Horace, let me say that the situation has changed since I came to the Senate. When I first came to the Senate, any senator could offer an amendment that they wanted. It was that way under Bob Dole's Senate. And it didn't even have to be germane to the subject at hand. Robert C. Byrd, the Democrat from West Virginia, who represented the institutional flame of the Senate, always talked about the fact the Senate was the last bastion of minority rights and the only legislative body in the history of the world that guaranteed minority rights. That's changed. In the last year, Republicans have had 8 votes. 8 votes on amendments that we thought, at least, represented a better alternative to our colleagues across the aisle. The majority leader, Harry Reid, has not allowed us any amendments. So I know it's easy for Harry Reid, or anybody for that matter, to stop and think a minute and say, well, these Republicans are obstructing anything that the president wants. It isn't that. It's that we would like to be heard. We would like to vote. We would like to offer alternatives that we think are better alternatives. Quite frankly, alternatives that are in the better interest and in the majority view of Kansans. I'm not able to do that. 2 years ago, I changed that, and I convinced Harry to open up a farm bill. We had 73 amendments. We had 300 amendments waiting. We got it done in 2.5 days. We reached across the aisle. It wasn't the greatest farm bill of all time, but it was a pretty good bill. And then all of a sudden it changed. And then the majority leader has just decided he's a one-man rules committee, and he decides what legislation is considered, when it's considered, and how it's considered. Well, that's raised a considerable amount of blood pressure on the part of Republican members, I can assure you, including me. And now Harry Reid has indicated he wants to change the First Amendment. There's no need to change the First Amendment. It's for the people. It's not for senators. And it isn't for one group or the other. It isn't for liberals or conservatives or whatever. It's for Americans. It's for our people. So when things like this happen, these kind of issues tend to get partisan. Or at least they get very, very strong feelings. And I'm sorry that that has happened. I wish that we could get back to a situation where the debt was under control and that we had positive answers in regards to health care. I don't think Obamacare really provided that. We have that situation in the VA now. It just seems like we're never able to find who's accountable in this, in these kind of things. So if I come across as being too strident, I don't apologize for my strong feelings and how I try to represent Kansas, but I think we have to, number one, I think we have to come together in the Republican Party simply because I do not think President Obama is representing the best interest of Kansans, especially with government overregulation, which is, by the way, the number one issue that I hear about in Kansas. I hope I have been able to address at least some of your concerns, and I thank you for your service to our state. We have Ryan from Leavenworth.
Hi, I'd like to know what your plans are for ending the Federal Reserve, which will actually get our debt under control, and I'm surprised you don't seem aware of that fact. I'd like to know what you've been doing to end the Federal Reserve. And second question would be, if you are depending on how you answer the first question, I'd like to know how you plan on winning your next election.
That's an election question. It's a political question. We're not supposed to do this on this live official call. The answer to that's pretty easy. I intend to get more votes. But let me talk about something about the budget imbalance and the trillions of dollars in regards to the deficit and the 18 trillion on the debt. One thing to do is to pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which would create certainly more discipline and get us onto the road of a sustainable federal financial situation. So the balanced budget amendment, I think, is one answer. Basically, I'm trying to look at these other bills that we've introduced with regards to the same kind of thing. But as to the Fed, I said earlier in my remarks, the $75 billion they're adding to the economy and what is going on is part of the problem. I support much more oversight on the Fed and support Senator Paul's legislation to do so. Rand Paul, I think, is on the right track. The Fed acts as a very autonomous body. They have no oversight, and Senator Paul's bill would provide that oversight. So I guess I did it in reverse order. I hope that answers your question. Sharon of Topeka. Sharon.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have an agricultural question. I noticed this when I have been shopping for Kansas beef, and why is the United States allowing Canada? We're importing beef from Canada, and that beef is cheaper than the regular beef that was coming from local sources.
Well, as a member of the World Trade Organization, the United States has some trade obligations. We are a net exporter of beef, and that should not change. Now, trade is a two-way street, however, and the Department of Agriculture is considering a request to open trade from some regions of Brazil and also Canada, and that's already happening. At the direction of the Secretary. Now, this is not for live beef cattle, only processed meat that meets our standards, our safety standards. The proposal is still being considered by the Department of Agriculture. Again, trade is a two-way street, and if we shut down that, we export a lot of agriculture to Canada, and for that matter to South America, and for that matter all over the world. So if you take action on one of the imports, they may close down some of the exports we send to them, if that makes any sense to you. Basically, bottom line, trade is a two-way street. We benefit more from this than we lose. And thank you so much for that question. Ronald from Leavenworth.
This is me. Senator Pat Roberts, this is Ronald Hutchins from Leavenworth. Hey, I ain't got a bad word to say about the Republicans. And matter of fact, I give y'all a lot of praise. But my main thing is illegal immigration. I hope that once y'all get in power, that y'all do enforcement first. And I mean a wall, whatever, get them out of here, the one that's working illegal, because they're taking jobs away from Americans, and they're putting too much of a burden on the United States. Now, I know y'all going to do all the rest of stuff good, cut back on the federal government and all that good stuff, but y'all need to concentrate on this illegal immigration once y'all get in power. And I hope that y'all got enough guts to do enforcement first. We need enforcement first for a couple of years before we think about this whole comprehensive immigration stuff, because there's too many of them in here. There's too many criminals, immigrants in here. Even in the Kansas system, there's according to records, there's 600 illegals in the Kansas system. Just think how many there are nationwide. If we could get rid of some of those guys, it'll our gals, whoever they are, it'll put less of a burden on our federal government and our state institutions. And that's what I want to see. I want to see y'all pass some tough laws to get rid of illegals, especially the criminals, and work on enforcement first only.
Ronald, any effort to reform our immigration system has to begin with really, and I mean really, securing our borders. It's clear that we have to focus on border security to end the influx of illegal immigration. And furthermore, I think it's important that we do not include amnesty in any immigration bill. Now, last year the Senate passed a bill. It was a comprehensive immigration reform bill. I voted no because it provides legal status to illegal immigrants before securing our borders. And I have serious concerns about how the new programs and changes to current law would have been implemented. I don't think, even though they called it a comprehensive bill, even Marco Rubio, who was for it, now is against it, he said that this bill will not serve our immigration problems. We need feasible and workable solutions. Now, the House is next to act. That's where the immigration bill is now. And over there in the House, they plan to use a step-by-step approach. Guess what the first step ought to be, and that's to secure our borders. No decisions have been made on whether the House will move forward with the legislation this year. And there are some that will use this bill for political purposes and add poison pill amendments to it so it won't go anywhere. But you're exactly right, Ronald. Thank you for bringing it up, that the first thing we have to do is secure our borders. I appreciate it. Thank you. Next question is Heidi from Basehor.
Good afternoon. It's nice to talk with you tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
I have several questions, and also I just wanted to say, in regards to what Ronald just asked, that is very important. As far as I'm concerned, is we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books, and for our president to tell AGs all around the United States that they don't have to follow those laws if they don't want to is just abysmal to me. I'm curious as to there's several things. What you can do about all the corruption, all the lies that we've been told, all the cover-ups that have been perpetrated upon the American people. It has just been amazing to me that this president and his administration gets away with not conforming to the Constitution. I mean, that's against the law. And I don't know why you are not, and I include you and all the senators and all the people in the House, aren't doing your dead level best to oust this president and his administration because of the failed policies that he is not even following our Constitution. I mean, the Constitution used to mean something, and it right now is, I could line my birdcage with it, and no one would care. And so that's why I'm just very upset that these things are happening, one right after the other. He continues to break the law, and he's still there. I don't understand why all of you guys have lawyer backgrounds and, political, what to do, what to bring out. And also, why not, you guys aren't getting the word out how Harry Reid is sitting on all these bills that Republicans have come up with. I don't know how many bills he's sitting on now that could be voted on if Harry would just let them go to the Senate.
Heidi, the answer to that is all of them. We have had 8 votes in the last year on Republican alternatives to bills. There was a tax extender bill that recently did not pass, and that we had about 3 or 4 or 5 amendments that we thought should be considered. One of them was the repeal of the medical device tax, which has caused real problems in the medical community. Let me just say, I think when you say oust the president, you're talking about impeaching him. I share your concern about the president's actions, especially his abuse of executive powers. The spending priorities of the Congress or the nation are first considered in the House of Representatives, then by the Senate, then it's the president's job to administer them, not change them, or not do them by executive order. And I'm trying every means that I know of, every means at my disposal to defend the divided powers. This includes legislative initiatives, appropriations, lawsuits, the bully pulpit. I'm not going to let up. And just yesterday I went to the Senate floor talking about Harry Reid, and it pained me to do so, but as the ranking Republican on the Rules Committee, his suggestion that we need to amend the Constitution, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, is just ridiculous. That amendment doesn't need to be changed. We already have that right of the freedom of speech. It was a pretty tough speech. We had some people just calling a while back say that I'm being too strident, but my word, Harry Reid is not James Madison. This is just not right. Now, if you're going to impeach the president, there is a particular bill of particulars that has to be for treason, bribery, high crimes, or misdemeanors. Now, you may feel he fits into any one of those categories, but here's the important thing. Only the House of Representatives can decide whether impeachment is the appropriate course of action. Then in the Senate, we must wait until a majority of the House votes brings any impeachment charges. If the House were to pass impeachment charges, and remember that's what happened with President Clinton, a two-thirds majority in the Senate would need to take place to vote to convict the president before he could be removed from office. That did not happen with President Clinton, and with Harry Reid today and the majority in the Senate, that would not happen today either. So while not impossible, impeaching a sitting president was intentionally made a difficult process by our founding fathers. Now, that does not mean that we can't do a better job of articulating how the majority has taken over the rights of the minority in the Senate and changed the Senate of the United States, and how the majority leader has stopped every alternative that we think represents a better interest for Kansans and our constituents from voting. We've only had 8 votes in the last year. Now, I made mention of the Farm Bill a little while back, 2 years ago, when we had 73 amendments considered, and many Republican amendments, and some were adopted. That's the way to do business, but that's not the way the Senate is being operated today. But now, rest assured, Heidi, I am not giving up. By the way, I'm not a lawyer. Again, this is Senator Pat Roberts. I have time for a few more questions, so stay on the line. At the end of the call today, I'm going to transfer everybody to voicemail, and you're going to have the option to leave your question and comments along with your name and address. I'll get back to you. If there's an issue you'd like help with, remember you can always call me at 785-295-2745. That's your office in Topeka. Or visit with me at roberts.senate.gov. You can also add me on Facebook or Twitter, so please add me there. Just time for a few more questions. Let's have Gary in Topeka.
Yeah, Pat, good afternoon. Say, I'm interested in wondering how you're going to vote and take a lot of action towards this responsibility of Congress regarding the giveaway of the Internet to the global community. I'm very concerned that that is in a process. I don't understand why in the world it would be something that they'd want to do. It's affecting the United States, freedom of speech, and also the Second Amendment. I'm an NRA member. I certainly know you're supportive of that, and I'd like your continued interest in it. And so those are my 2 questions.
Well, we're not giving up on the Second Amendment. As a matter of fact, we're going to continue to champion that. Gary, I recently joined a number of my colleagues in a letter to the National Telecommunications Information Administration strongly objecting to its decision to end its contract with ICANN. That's the big acronym for the group that used to be in charge of the Internet. This proposal is very troubling, and I'll make sure the NTIA doesn't relinquish the control of the domain names to any government body. If anybody thinks that countries like Iran or China or Russia will determine what global sites can be accessed, that's crazy. Not on my watch. I'm very much opposed to this, and thank you for that call. We have Carl of Paola.
Yes, sir. Senator Roberts, thank you. I just visited with Senator Dole here just about 3 weeks ago here in Paola, And boy, what a fantastic man he's doing at 92 years old. He's great. But anyway, I was kind of wondering about these veterans hospitals that we're having a problem with. I got stuff up here at the VA hospital in Kansas City, and I got hearing aids and eyeglasses and stuff. And I'll tell you what, it seems like we're doing a pretty good job here in Kansas. Thank goodness. I just hope that they don't have one of those secret books and stuff. But is there anything they can really do to straighten these people out?
Well, let's give it a shot, Carl, and thank you for your kind comments, and thank you for remembering Bob Dole. He sure remembered you because he mentioned that meeting to me. I talk to him at least twice a week, and he's going clear out there to northwestern Kansas, and I think he's leaving next week. And I told him, "Why are you touring Kansas when I'm touring Kansas? I'm the one that's ought to be doing this." But he's just a wonderful man, and I think people really enjoy coming out to see him. Listen, as the senior Marine in the Congress, I've really fought to ensure our military heroes receive the care and benefit they deserve. Last month, a Phoenix, Arizona VA hospital physician came forward with allegations of 40 deaths caused by long appointment wait times. Now, unfortunately, we're hearing about other instances around the country. I do not know of any such information at the VA in Topeka, Kansas City, or Wichita. So we're going to keep a close watch on that. We must do better nationally for our veterans. I just signed a letter today written by Senator Scott of South Carolina. He's a good man. He calls for a special investigation of the VA wait list cover-up and whether VA employees may have received performance bonuses for which we now know they did not deserve. So while Congress holds hearings and investigates these cases, I've also joined my colleagues in proposing legislation that I think would improve the Department of Veterans Affairs. Basically, it would give the authority to the VA Secretary to fire or demote any VA leaders based on performance. My goodness, he at least needs that authority. We need the best employees managing the VA. Just this week, similar legislation has passed in the House. I think it'll pass in the Senate. So we have to find out what went wrong. We have to find out why. We have to find out who is responsible that led to these unscrupulous practices, and we have to hold them accountable. And that should include the possibility of criminal charges. No news of this kind yet in Kansas. We're keeping a close watch. Thanks, Carl. Again, this is Senator Pat Roberts. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. For those of you who had a question we were unable to get to you, you will now have the option of leaving a voicemail where you can leave any comments or concerns, along with your name and address, and I'll get back to you. Remember, along with your comments, please leave your name and address. Otherwise, we just won't know where to send our response. If there's an issue you want help with, remember, you can always call your Topeka office, 785-295-2745. Or visit with me on the web at roberts.senate.gov. And for those of you on Facebook and Twitter, you can find me there too. So please add me for daily updates. Thank you so much again for participating in my teletown hall meeting tonight. My time is up. Thank you so much for yours.